Well, time for our third and final race from the BRSCC Mazda MX-5 Super Series. For the first three on the grid from race 3, well, refer to the results from race 2. We've got Josh Jackson and Richard Braylon there on the front row of the grid, with the 18-year-old Jake Bailey on the second row of the grid. But alongside him is the nearly man of this weekend, who has come so close to a victory already this weekend, Jeremy Crook. It's been an interesting and exciting one for you this weekend, hasn't it?
Fab weekend, absolutely fab weekend. Probably the best weekend's racing I've had so far. So, yeah, really good, really good. It would be nice if one of those top three took each other out, I think, but we'll sit behind them and see what happens.
Well, I can feel some rain in the air, so maybe that might be your chance.
It may well be. Ex-rally man, so I'm good at going sideways.
Fantastic. Well, we'll see how you get on. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. That's going to be interesting to watch, I think, isn't it? To see how Jeremy Crook gets on. He will line up fourth, as Jake was saying. We start this third race the way in which we finished race 2. So it's Jackson and Breland, Bailey and Crook, then Simon Fleet and Sam Bailey ahead of Patrick Collins and Simon Orange on row number 4. Row 5 for George Grant and Simon Woods. Row 6, Ray Worley and Matt Pickford ahead of Russ Lindsay, Jim Hart, James Kell and Liz Walton at the tail end of the field. But a few stories to watch out for here. Jeremy Crook, as we said, desperate to get himself onto the podium. Jake Bailey, desperate to make amends for his off in race 2. But we're away and racing for the final time this weekend. And we're on board again with Patrick Collins looking back at some very close quarters action there. George Grant up the inside. And I think George is going to make that move stick. But here we go, Richard Breland trying to go around the outside for the race lead. Don't think he's going to make that one stick as the field pours its way down in towards the first corner at Richards. Matt Pickford there around the outside of Patrick Collins, but again that's not likely to work. But here comes Jake Bailey trying to get himself ahead of Richard Breland and latch onto the coattails of Josh Jackson before Josh can make any sort of escape at the front of the field. Bailey will be kicking himself still, I'm sure, after throwing away what looked like a promising chance of a race 2 victory. But he's back into second place now here at the start of race 3. George Grant up the inside of Simon Orange, leads on him maybe slightly. Simon just gets out onto the dirty part of the road, which also gets him sideways. It helps hold them both up, and so Patrick Collins will now be able to close in and maybe make it 3 abreast under braking. No, that was never likely to work. So George Grant with a bit of a lock-up on the inside goes through. Look at this 2 and 3 wide action behind. Ray Worley there racing with Simon Woods. We've got Jim Hart, Russ Lindsay and James Kell, who we haven't seen that much of because he started from the pit lane in the last race and had a 10-second penalty applied at the start of race 1, so we haven't really seen him a factor in the midfield squabbles yet. Hopefully race 3 will go his way and we'll get to see a bit more of him racing his way through the order. Back here at Simon Orange there from on board with Patrick Collins. They turn their way into the right-hander at Williams, but Pickford behind running a bit wide, I noticed. That might leave him susceptible to attack from the group of cars behind, but the leaders make their way in towards the complex for the first time. And look at Jake Bailey trying to find a way past Josh Jackson. Remember, last time out at Brands Hatch, we saw the first 2 races won by Jackson, but Bailey was able to take victory in race 3, so can he do the same thing again here this weekend? Looking back at Jeremy Crook there, he has not had the start that he might have anticipated because Sam Bailey's gone past him and Simon Fleet is closing in behind, so he is down to 5th position now. Here is Patrick Collins looking at the inside of George Grant, and George tried to squeeze him into the inside of the track there, but Patrick Collins was coming through. George, I think, will now be able to slot into line and avoid losing another place there to the next group of cars behind. Leaders, though, back across the start finish line. Look at Jake Bailey pulling out of the slipstream immediately here to try and get himself ahead of Josh Jackson. I speculated in race 1 that maybe Jake had been happy to just follow Josh Jackson around to the last lap, but that is not the case in this race because he's made a spectacular move, has he, around the outside of Ridges. I thought he might have made it stick, but Jackson was maybe coming back at him on the run down towards the Wilson hairpin. Meanwhile, Simon Woods and Simon Orange just side by side. Matt Pickford going up the inside, and they're 3 abreast into the corner. Lock up of brakes, hold your breath everyone, let's hope they all get through. Yes they do, and Pickford is able to pick a place up. At the front of the field though, Jake Bailey has got the race lead away, so despite Josh Jackson trying to retaliate at the next corner, he has not been able to retake the race lead, and so Jake Bailey is out in front. Jackson's 2nd, Breland 3rd, Sam Bailey is 4th, and it looks like maybe it is still Jeremy Crook in 5th. Leaders back out of Agostini though. Can Jake Bailey escape? That's probably doubtful with the effect of the slipstream round here. His midfield scrapping, though, is still incredibly intense. And Ray Worley is sideways there. We've got Russ Lindsay out on the grass in the background. And does he spin? No, brilliantly held. But that was all a little bit unfortunate because he's now fallen some way behind this group of cars. So he's got some work to do. Front of the field though, Jay Bailey actually maybe attempting to prove me wrong here. Well, I'm sure he's attempting to prove me wrong, but he might actually be proving me wrong by pulling a bit of a gap over Jackson, but Jackson will get a whiff of the slipstream here down the Bentley straight. Let's see how much closer he is as they make their way down in towards the left-hander at Brundle. He's certainly going to be closer, but not close enough to attack, I don't think. So Bailey doing a good job for the time being. As long as he can have near enough a 1 second advantage every time that he arrives at the one of the long straights, then he should be okay. But of course that's easier said than done, particularly since there are only 2 or 3 corners between the Bentley straight and the pit straight again, so he hasn't really got that much time to build up any sort of a gap before the slipstream starts to take effect and allow Jackson to close back in. Indeed, you can see that there, can't you, that Josh Jackson has stayed right with him through the second half of this lap, and so as they come out onto the pit straight, he may be close enough to close in and attack on the run down towards the first corner. Across the start-finish line, they're about to come. Richard Breland's still a part of this as well in 3rd place. The 3 cars fairly equidistantly spaced out. There's Sam Bailey in 4th. This is Matt Pickford further back, looking at a battle between George Grant and Ray Worley, 2 of the more experienced drivers in the field. And Ray looking to the outside, but that was always a little bit optimistic, I think. And indeed, chopped back into the slipstream on the run down into turn 1. There's Simon Woods next in behind, and then Jim Hart, and then James Kell. So couldn't get much closer to this group, could it? Matt Pickford, if he had time to look in his mirrors, would have a grandstand view of this. And Jim Hart, well, where was he going? He was going on to the Snetterton 200 circuit, I think, there. He was very, very deep on the brakes into the Wilson hairpin, and in fact ended up on the grass on the exit of the corner. So he's now got Russ Lindsay to play with again further back. 2 drivers, therefore, recovering from slightly wayward moments in the early going here. Simon Woods here with James Kell breathing down his neck into the left-hander at Agostini. Outside line on the way in. What about the inside on the way out? Oh, Matt Pickford goes around right in front of them all, where we've been enjoying some brilliant rear-facing camera shots from his car, but there'll be no one to see behind him now, because by the time he's rejoined from that 360-degree spin, he'll be right at the tail end of the field. But how many drivers have we seen doing that, running wide out of Agostini, getting onto the AstroTurf? Luckily, so far this weekend, everyone's been able to save it, but Matt Pickford, the first one to fully rotate, and so he loses quite a lot of positions because he was running fairly well inside the top 10 at that point. Back with Simon Fleet and Jeremy Crook here as they turn their way underneath the Snetterton Bridge. Then this gap back to Patrick Collins, who's got Simon Orange in behind him. Simon was 8th in race 1, 8th in race 2. He'd like to improve on that if at all possible. Had a best finish of 6th at Brands Hatch last time out, did Patrick, but sorry, did Simon, but is he going to be able to improve on that this time around, I wonder? Into the right-hander at Coram, but we've got 2, 4, 6 cars here running more or less nose to tail in the midfield group. Good view there of James Kell, the green number 33 car, who I mentioned we hadn't really seen that much of this weekend because of his various trials and tribulations, but that very, very well presented Fortuna liveried number 33 car is looking pretty rapid now. Novice cross on the back of his car. That's something we'll see a lot of, I think, this year, as relative newbies to racing use the MX-5 Super Series as a bit of a launching pad for them into maybe the Super Cup in the future. And James Kell quite draw himself alongside Simon Woods there. Just up the road we saw Ray Worley trying to get himself back around the outside of George Grant. Again, George was able to get his elbows out to defend though. Patrick Collins there we saw coming under increasing pressure from Simon Orange. You don't really know where to look, do you? They're all starting to pair off now in this group. We've got Collins and Orange, then we've got Grant defending hard still as well, ahead of the field. The top 3 cars staying reasonably close together actually. With Collins down into the left-hander at Agostini. Simon Orange has made moves here before, but he's on the outside line on this occasion, looking maybe more for the defensive line out of the turn. Simon Woods and James Kell still side by side. James likewise tried to take the outside line into the corner and then carry the speed down the relatively short straight into Hamilton's. That's this corner. He wasn't quite able to force an overlap. Ray Worley having another little peek up the inside of George Grant. As we ride back on board now with Simon Orange. Can't tell whether that's grime and dirt on the windscreen or whether we are starting to get just a few spots of rain. We heard Jake saying pre-race that there was the threat of rain in the air. It certainly clouded over considerably compared to the sort of conditions that we had at the start of the weekend. And you can see in the background there's quite a lot of rain off in the distance, so hopefully it won't arrive at the track and cause any dramas. Of course, the cars all run on grooved tyres, so they wouldn't feel the need to pit if the rain came, but it will still, of course, limit the amount of adhesion that they have. All again with Patrick Collins, looking forward this time. Behind him is still the 67 car of Simon Orange, who, try as he might, can't quite prise the door open, can he, on the 999 car. Murray's corner, the next corner up, potentially taking opportunity, but no, he's not close enough. Ray Worley is not close enough to George Grant, and James Kelly's not close enough to Simon Woods, so the positions will all stay as they were. As they streak back across the start-finish line, just into the second half of this race now. And Patrick Collins enjoying the battling that he's having here, I think, in the midfield. He's been right in the thick of all of the action. So too have George Grant and Ray Worley. And Simon Woods has had a bit of a strange weekend because he's had flashes of pace, but then always seems to find himself slipping backwards. He was 10th in race 1, he was 10th in race 2 as well, so Simon looking to improve on that, but at the moment has actually lost quite a few positions at the start of this one. He's outside the top 10 as we speak. Back with the race leaders very briefly there. Jake Bailey and Josh Jackson still leading the way from Richard Breland in third. You sense that maybe Jackson is doing what I suspected Jake Bailey was doing in race 1 and just waiting till a later opportunity to make a move, because there's almost no sense in going into the race lead at this stage, knowing full well that the slipstream will probably allow the car you've just overtaken to come right back at you. Simon Woods and James Kell once again running side by side into Agostini, but as long as Woods holds that inside line, it doesn't appear that James Kell has got the switchback manoeuvre figured out just yet. And so, although mind you, I say that, and I'm going to have to eat my words, because in the background we can see that he was back up the inside into the left-hander at Hamilton's, but in the end, Simon Woods gets across to the apex in time to defend. Nowhere near the apex is George Grant, though. He's run wide coming out of Oggies and he's right out onto the grass. He only now rejoins, turning into Williams, and he's lost all of those positions. So through has gone Ray Worley, through has gone Simon Woods, and through has gone James Kell. So all of the pressure that Ray Worley was applying to the back of George Grant has finally told. Simon Fleet, meanwhile, has just moved himself ahead of Sam Bailey. So that was a move made down the back straight. Simon Fleet again, there or thereabouts, isn't he? He had 3 third-place finishes at Brands Hatch. He has had a 6th and a 5th so far this weekend, so his pace hasn't been quite as impressive at Snetterton as it was at Brands Hatch last time out. But he's just picked up another position, and he'll be rather happy with that one. Right, what can Simon Woods do about Patrick Collins? He's been looking for a way through for lap after lap after lap and just cannot prise the door open. Patrick Collins is defending in all of the right places. He's quick enough in all of the other places that he doesn't need to defend. As we rejoin Simon Fleet, who's now got Sam Bailey trying to come back round the outside. Not just trying to, actually doing it. Going round the outside into Rich's corner. There's a lot of grass that's been kicked up there as well. Huge sods of earth lying all over the middle of the road. Someone's cut the corner, I think, possibly through there. Yes, you can see they've cut the corner and hit a slightly boggy bit of grass, and that caught out Patrick Collins and Simon Orange. They're both sideways, but it's benefited Orange more than Collins, because Simon has got up the inside and he's finally, I think, going to make this move stick. Is he? Collins will try to hang tough around the outside, but I don't think he managed it. So through has gone Simon Orange, finally. What about at the front of the field, though? Can Josh Jackson get past Jake Bailey and make it a hat-trick of race victories? He wasn't quite able to do it at Brands Hatch because Jake Bailey denied him a race 3 victory. Is it going to be the same story here at Snetterton? Hard on the brakes here for Patrick Collins and Simon Orange as they continue their battle into the left-hander at Agostini. Back on the power on the way out, in towards Williams go the race leaders. And Jackson, you can just sort of see by the body language of the car, he's starting to get a bit more serious about this, and in his attempts to find a way through, Bailey does seem to get a good exit onto this Bentley straight, doesn't he? Which is by far and away the best opportunity to use that slipstream to make a move. Because whether you go to the inside or the outside into Brundle, as we've documented several times, you can make a move stick either way. But Bailey always seems to be just far enough ahead that whilst Josh Jackson is able to use the slipstream to close back in on the leader, he's not able to use it to draw alongside, and so Bailey doesn't really need to defend into the complex. Jackson is right back on his coattails as they go through Coram. Speaking of being on the coattails, Patrick Collins is not letting Simon Orange escape here either. The leaders turn their way now into the left-hander at Murray's. Back onto the pit straight, about 5 minutes left in this race. Further back, also going through the bomb hole and Coram. Patrick Collins pulling away now actually from Ray Worley behind him. But of course his main target is to try and find a way back ahead of Simon Orange. Right, leaders back into Riches. Avoid the dirt if you can, that presumably is still lying in the road. Well, no, it's been swept out wide now because a few drivers have hit it. Jackson has a little look at the inside. Not really close enough, though, to outbrake Jake Bailey into the Wilson hairpin. So they make their way back out onto the left-hander at Palmer's. Matt Pickford we're back with here, and he is still being chased down by Russ Lindsay, who, remember, these are both recovering from grassy moments early on down at the same corner. And Agostini, Pickford ran wide in the early part of the race. Lindsay ran wide in the early part of the race, and Pickford actually rotated. This is the corner where they had their dramas, and it's where Jake Bailey had his drama, of course, in race 2, where he spun off onto the grass and threw away the race lead. He will not be wanting to do the same thing again in race 3, despite the pressure that he's feeling from Josh Jackson. There are Jeremy Crook, Sam Bailey and Simon Fleet turning their way through that tight left-hander, one of the slowest corners on the track. But that's what makes the Snetterton 300 circuit such an exciting layout, because you have all of these long flat-out sections into big braking zones, and the longer the braking zone is, the more scope there is for some out-braking manoeuvres to be done. Patrick Collins was attempting there to outbrake Simon Orange, and then in his eagerness to get back on the throttle coming out of the corner, lost the rear of the car and loses 2 places, look, because Ray Worley and Simon Woods have both gone through. And speaking of being a bit too eager on the power, that's Sam Bailey running wide through Williams as up the lead of the race. This is for the lead. Josh Jackson goes ahead of Jake Bailey in rather robust fashion, but he has made the move stick, and so Josh Jackson, who I sensed was starting to get anxious to get back into the lead of the race, he's done it, and more to the point, look at the gap that he's pulled as a result of that little bit of contact. He was up the inside. We didn't see the start of that, but he got to the inside into Brundle, and Jake Bailey, it looked like, was trying to squeeze him down to the inside of the road, but Jackson was having none of it, so through he goes and into the lead of the race. Now, is there anything that Bailey can do about it? You would suggest potentially not, because there's quite a gap between the two of them now as we go through onto what potentially is the final lap. We'll have to wait and see just how much time we've got left on the clock. They're going to put a lap on Liz Walton, I think. There, she's the number 19 car. First time we've seen Liz so far today. Novice cross at the back of her car as well, so she'll be hoping to get quicker and quicker the more experience she has in the car. Back with Patrick Collins here, and he is really struggling for rear grip. It's possibly starting to rain out there. Yes, it is. Look, water on the camera lens down at Murray's, so that's what's starting to catch a few drivers out. We see Jim Hart also getting caught out by the slippery surface. Just what you don't want at the end of a long weekend of racing is to suddenly have some tricky and changeable track conditions when you really just want to get to the end of this final race in one piece. At the head of the field, oh, well, we were briefly back at the head of the field, then we rejoined Patrick Collins and George Grant going side by side into Riches, but at the head of the field, look, Josh Jackson has been reeled back in by Jake Bailey. Now, the changing conditions is going to have really suited Jake Bailey here, because he is no longer the race leader, and so Josh Jackson, as the new race leader, is the guinea pig. He arrives at each corner not knowing quite what the grip levels are going to be like, whereas Jake Bailey, running behind him, could sort of gauge from how Josh Jackson is getting through the corner whether or not he can go a little bit quicker. And so in some ways, when the rain starts coming down, particularly this light rain that's just making the track a little bit greasy in places, it's sometimes an advantage to be the car second in line, because you get that split second extra reaction time if you arrive at a corner that's particularly slippery. Down the back straight we go. I believe we are on the final lap of the race, and so Jake Bailey is going to be working double time to try and find a way through. He looks to the inside into Brundle and goes through. Jake Bailey goes through, but he can't make the corner. Oh, that's why the hand was out of the cop, but he rejoins the track right in front of Jackson. Oh, well, that was dramatic stuff. And he did it all one-handed as well. He was up the inside, but he was so late on the brakes, he realised immediately they couldn't make the corner. Hand came straight out of the cockpit to warn Josh Jackson to get out of his way, because Jake was going to have to take to the grass. And so in the end, it is Josh Jackson who will recover the race lead. It's been a dramatic race, this one. By far the most entertaining as far as the lead battle has been concerned. But it is going to be the first ever trio of race wins, a hat-trick of race wins here at Snetterton. 3 race wins from 3 for Josh Jackson. He takes the victory from Jake Bailey in second, Richard Breland in third, then Jeremy Crook and Sam Bailey back in the top 5. Simon Fleet, Simon Orange, Patrick Collins, James Kell is 9th. Look at that, good result for him, ahead of Ray Worley 10th. Then it's George Grant, Simon Woods, Russ Lindsay. They all had dramas late on, ahead of Jim Hart, Matt Pickford, and Liz Walton gets to the finish, but 1 lap down.
Well, Josh, that is the perfect result, the hat-trick, but it was looking quite tough to get there at one point.
Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't easy. Jake done really well. So yeah, no, I was happy to do it. Couldn't quite manage it at Brands, but it's nice to do it here.
Well, Jake, second position, but I think for a long time you're going to be thinking that was the one that got away. What happened to the closing stages?
Yeah, I thought it was mine, but yeah, clearly wasn't to be. It's Josh's weekend this weekend, so well done to him.
Well, Richard, all in all, a good weekend and another piece of silverware to take home. That's not bad for you and the team.
No, very happy with that. 2 podiums today, really good. You know, second and the third. The team did really well. Blink Motorsport set the cars up, and really happy with that. A little bit cautious in that last race when the rain came down, but no, it was good. Couldn't keep up with the front 2, but had a good race.
Well, it's been a great weekend here at Snetterton in the Super Series, and a hat-trick of victories for Josh Jackson takes him into a 7-week break going to Cadwell Park. Can anybody steal the top of the dais from him there? You'll have to tune in to find out.